Hey everybody, this is part 2 of our Fusion 360 stool tutorial. So where we left off was we had this kind of one piece of our stool with the four spacer joints that are going to go into it. And our goal today is to actually look at trying to put this together into an assembled photorealistic rendering. And so what we're going to do for this is we're actually going to come back to this just one piece and these four joints later on. And so what I'd like to do is save this as a new document. So we're going to go from stool sample v1 to stool sample assembled. And that's because we're going to, when we do our CNC work, we're going to want to come back to this original version. But with our assembled, we're going to walk through how to actually manipulate these pieces and then do some photorealistic rendering with them. So to start off, what we need to do is kind of move these joints into place. And the way we can do this is actually pretty easy. You'll notice that I have this little bodies tab open. So when we extruded those sketches that we did in the last tutorial, what we did was we essentially created 5 objects. And in Fusion 360, these are called bodies. And so we're going to be moving these 4 spacers kind of on top of the holes where they'll be kind of spacing out each of the slices. And so to do this, we're going to click M, and that's for move. And you'll see that this move object pops up. Also, you can access that through the modify for this move copy. But we are going to be moving these objects, and we want to do that very precisely. It's important that these things line up exactly where they're going to be. Now you'll notice that we could just click on an object and we can kind of drag it around, possibly. Let's see if I can actually get it to select. Great. Okay, so we could try to do this by freehand, but the difficulty is that we may not get it exactly where we want it to go. And so there's actually a different approach that we can take when moving these. So when we click on move, you'll notice that over here there's an option called point to point. And this is going to allow us to move one point of our object relative to another point of a different object. And so what we're going to do is we're going to click on that, and you see it says, select the origin point. So to do that, I'm going to select kind of this bottom edge of this particular spacer. And where I would like it to go is I would really like for it to be attached to this point right here. And so what we can do is in moving point to point is we're gonna, oh, hold on a second. Let's try that again. We're gonna click on point to point. For origin point, we're gonna select a point right there. And then for target point, we're gonna select a point right here on this edge. Okay. And we need to make sure that it knows we want to move that body. Okay, well, let's try that again. That's being a little silly. Okay, so we're going to move this body. Okay. We're going to go point to point. We want to point there. And we want to point there. Okay, so my computer is just running a little bit slow, but you can see that we've been able to move it directly on top. And if we look at a top view here, we should see that it lines up perfectly with where we want it to go. Okay, so we're going to do that 3 more times. So again, hit M to move. We want to select the body we want to move first. So we want to move this spacer. Okay, we're going to select our origin point on this bottom edge. And we're going to select our target point on this bottom edge here. Okay? And we click OK. And that moves it there. So let's go ahead and do that again. So we select this one here. Okay. And let's select our origin point about here. and our target point up here, and click OK. And we're going to do that one more time. Select our spacer here, our origin point here, and our target point here. And click OK. So at this point, you can see that we've actually got kind of one completed layer. Now, per the instructions of the project, this needs to be 12 inches thick as well. And so if we have a 1/2 inch piece of MDF here and a 1/2 inch here, that means that we need to expand this and have essentially 12 copies of this. Now, one way that we could do this would be to copy and paste it and kind of position it a bunch. But we're gonna use some of Fusion 360's kind of more advanced functions to do that much more quickly. So what we're going to do with this is we are going to create a pattern, and for this pattern we are going to select a rectangular pattern. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of tell it what objects we would like it to duplicate along a very specific set of guidelines. So for objects, we'll go ahead and select all of our objects. So we want this one, and this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. So all of them are selected. For directions, we want to kind of stack them up along the Z axis. And so I'm going to click on that directions, and I'm going to come over here and select the Z axis here. Okay. For distance type, spacing should be okay. For quantity, I'm going to go ahead and increase the quantity of these, and I'm going to make 12 of them. I want them to be spaced 1 inch apart. Okay, and you can already see it kind of giving you a little preview there. And if we go ahead and I'm going to kind of adjust my view here just a bit so we can kind of see what it's doing. We can see how it's began to stack up. And this looks pretty good. So, my quantity got to 13 somehow. Let's go to 12. No, just it doesn't like 12 for some reason. What if I type in 12? There we go. Okay, and if we click OK, we'll let it do its magic. And we should see now that we have 12 of these stacked. Now you will notice, interestingly enough, that we get an extra set of spacers up here. We don't need those, and so we're going to come in and we'll right-click on the body here in the body menu and click remove. That is different than the delete command, and so remove is usually safer because it doesn't depend on a whole bunch of other things going on. And so okay, so with that one, let's go and find that in the list here so we can remove that. Okay. Okay, let's see which one this is. If we select it, it should be here. And we will remove that. And if we select this last one, oops. Okay, that looks like body 38. And we can remove that. Okay. So now we kind of have what looks to be our completed stool. Now you will notice that it's up on its edge, and that's just kind of a natural extent of how we created it. And what we'd really like to do is to kind of turn this over onto its side so that we can render it as it would be kind of standing or sitting on the ground. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually kind of encircle the entire stool, and we're going to move this. So we'll hit M for move. And we want to click on rotate. Now for this, we're going to be rotating it along probably either the X or the Y axis. And so if we do that, let's move this over here. To get a better look. Okay. Okay, doesn't look like it's actually giving me an option there, so let's come over here and we're going to do a free rotate. And what we can do is we can take this little node, we can rotate it out 90 degrees, and we're actually going to bring it up just a bit. Here we go. Okay. So with that in place, we're going to go ahead and click OK. And let it complete the rotation and the translation. And here we can see what our completed stool would look like. So this, you can kind of see it's got these two legs that are in the ground, maybe kind of a comfortable seat here, a fun shape in the center. And so that should be kind of ready for us to do a photorealistic rendering on. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and save, just in case something bad happens later on. Now at this point, we're going to switch out of the model workspace into the render workspace. Okay, so it's going to take us into this new space, and you can see that it's actually created lots of interesting shades for us already. I don't know if we're actually going to use these materials. We'll probably try something a little bit different. But what we want to do is we want to kind of set up our scene settings and our appearance. And so if we go into scene settings, you'll see that we've got lots of different options. The one thing that I'm going to change is I want to enable reflections. I think that will give kind of a fun look. And you can also play around with the background color as well. So this can be important for kind of getting something set up for your portfolio. So if you want a portfolio that has kind of, you know, a black background or a white background, you can adjust that here. And so let's see, I'm going to choose a black background. So, because I think that's going to give us the best reflections once we kind of change up our material properties here. Okay, so next up, what we're going to do is we're going to think about some material properties. And so for that, we are going to change up the appearance. And for here, you'll see that we have lots of different materials that we can choose from. Right now, it looks like it's satin steel, but we're not going to be making this out of steel. We're going to be making this out of wood. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select pine. And we'd like to really apply that to everything. And so what I'm going to come up here is I'm going to come up to our bodies, and I'm going to select all of our bodies, which is quite numerous. Okay. And if we drag pine onto that body, and this may take a moment or two, what we can see is that we're going to be able to now render that object in pine. We can see that we've got the nice reflections down here, and it doesn't look too bad. So we can take a look at it from here. We can take a look at it from a top view, and we can see that it's doing a good job. Now this isn't the final rendered version. This is kind of a preview version. But even this already starts to look pretty good. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and set up our render settings. So if we come up here to this little teapot and we click on render, this is going to give us some options for setting up our render. Now this is where you have to make some important choices, because you can choose a trade-off between quality or speed. So if you come over here and choose something like 800 by 600, this is a very small image, but it'll render very quickly. If we do something kind of larger, and you notice this is for web, if you're thinking about things like print, you'll see how these files get bigger and bigger. Just know that those are going to take a lot longer. So if you're trying to save out for portfolio quality material, and I recommend that you do, you should choose something from the print selection here. You know, maybe even all the way up to 8.5 by 11, which would give you a full page render of your thing. And you could also choose things like, you know, having a higher render quality. For demonstration purposes, we're going to go with the smallest one because I want to keep this quick. But just know that this is for demonstration purposes only. You should choose a higher quality render. We do want to use a local renderer. So this is going to use the computing power on your computer to render it. And we're going to have just standard render quality. So when you click render, it's going to choose the view that you're currently in. So when you click render, it's going to render a photo that looks very nice of this particular angle. For your project, you should choose 3 different angles at least. And so we're going to choose this. This is an isometric view. And so we're going to click render, and we're going to set it to work rendering. Okay, and it says local render started. Once it's complete, click on the thumbnail. So this is kind of going to work. Now, I anticipate that this is going to run slowly on mine because I'm recording this and rendering at the same time. Yours should run a little bit quicker. But as that is rendering, I'm going to go choose a different view. I really like that right view, kind of looking straight down it. It really shows off a lot of the curvature. And so I'm going to choose that as another point of rendering. It'll save the settings from before, and we can click render. Notice how mine takes a minute or two, and it says local rendering started. Okay, we're going to choose maybe one more. Let's see what a top view would look like. This might show kind of how all those divisions work out. Yeah, that's okay. Let's see if we can. Yeah, maybe a top view is okay. So we'll do a top view, and we'll render again. And we'll click render. Okay. And you will notice that you'll start to see these little thumbnails come down. So as you add them, they'll get queued up. They'll render one at a time. And you'll have a little progress bar there. So we're going to pause here, and we'll let this render. And we'll come back and look at the final results in just a moment. Okay, so we're back. We've let the computer kind of take its time rendering these 3 views. So let's see how we did. So we're going to click down here and check out what we've got. So this was our isometric view that we did. You can see that it's kind of taken its time to render that very well. If we want, we can download this, which you'll want to do for your portfolio and for turning in the assignment. And so we'll go ahead and save that down to the desktop. And we can see these other views as well. So if we open this up, we can see that this is going to be our side view of our stool, which also looks very good. You can see some nice shading in the picture. And let's look at our top view to round things out. Okay, And again, we can see top view. We can see all the little spacers in there that are going to be cut and placed in. And this will be pretty good. So that is the conclusion of part 2 on how to assemble and render your camp stool.